Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm not Lee White, but I am Will Terry, and all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business, and together we published somewhere around 75 children's books, and we've all taught illustration at university art programs.
That's right. Each week we do all kinds of different conversations and answer questions. We'll have different artists that we'll interview from time to time, and this week is one of those times. Today we're joined by Sanford Greene, who's a comic artist out of North Carolina. He's one of my favorite comic artists. South Carolina. He's one of my favorite comic artists, and I've known him for years. We've talked off and on. We've tried to make this call happen many times, but he has a crazy schedule. We have a crazy schedule, and we finally figured out where the planets aligned and everything. But I want you to check out his work. Go into this having looked at some of his work, just so you can understand the raw skill and ability that's on display here with Sanford's work. And in this episode, we get into the state of the industry, the comics industry, how to sort of break in on sort of a creator level instead of working for some of the bigger publishers, working on your own stuff. We talk about one of the coolest things is how he's been able to AI proof his comics career. We dig into that towards the end there. That's some really cool stuff. What'd you get out of this, Will?
I mean, comics isn't my thing. I wasn't one of those kids that grew up with comics, but I can totally appreciate good artwork, great artwork. Yeah. And I really appreciated his artwork and his candor and honesty about his career and just the totality of, getting started and going through it. One major thing, unrelated to his work really, but is his current Kickstarter on Zoop. I didn't know that existed. It's not a Kickstarter. It's called Zoop, ZOOP. And they're kind of a one-stop shop. Instead of you having to go print after you raise your funds, they kind of help you arrange that and ship it out for you. They probably take a bigger cut than Kickstarter, but hey,
you have a smaller headache at the end of the day.
So that's cool. Yeah,
that's cool. Well, let's jump into it. Talk to Sanford Greene. I wanted to kick this off with the question. You've been in the comics industry for years, maybe 3 decades, 2 decades, something like that.
Yep.
I want to add 2. Okay. I want to ask you, give or take, right? Yeah. I want to ask you what do you think about the current state of the comics industry? It has been all over the place, I feel like, for the last 20 years. I just want to know how you feel about it right now.
Yeah, I think the thing about the industry, I was actually listening to a podcast just last night about the ebb and flows of the industry. And I think now we're on a trajectory of it trending upwards again. I think somewhere around the mid 2000s, it was definitely down. Roughly around the end of 2020, we, had the pandemic and that really I think sparked a new avenue for storytelling, avenues for storytelling, platforms. There's 1,000,001 podcasts out there right now that speak on comics and illustration alike. And I think there's just there's a lot of avenues in terms of creativity right now that I think is the thing that I take a lot of pride in to some degree, because we were right there at the cusp of that as well. Me and my creative partners on Bitterroot, we started our series in 2018, right when that trajectory was starting to trend upwards. It wasn't quite there yet, but like I said, 2020, the world shut down, and you would think that doom and gloom was at hand for our industry. That was the talk. But honestly, that was the spark.
Interesting.
It
So
rhymed. I did a rhyme there. That was pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, with Bitterroot, which is Image Comics, how did that like come about, and why Image Comics over any other publisher or even self-publishing it?
Well, that one was pretty straightforward, man. Complete ownership, no third party or second party, if you will. They publish it. You own the rights. You've done work there with Image. They're the only game in publishing, in comics. I would say, honestly, in publishing that does it, unless you self-publish. To some degree, Image is kind of like that, but it's not that at the same time. So you get the experience of a lot of the aspects of self-publishing, but then when it comes to the actual distribution, they take care of all of that. They take a small fee for that part, but you own everything. So yeah, it was pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah. So, like, as far as like how they vet projects, because they don't just take on any old project. What was the sort of the vetting process for you?
Honestly, we got Comic-Con coming up here really soon. It was actually a meeting with Eric Stevenson, publisher. We had a dinner meeting, and we pitched the idea at a dinner meeting, and he liked where we were going. And truth be told, I'll just be honest with you, our story was unique enough to where they didn't really have anything there like that, and they really wanted to. It's one of the few publishers, at least at that time, that you would think they would have a more diverse library. That they had some stories that were pretty diverse, but a lot of them, I would say 70% were kind of in the same vein. So they saw that as a warning to really go after more diverse stories. And we just happened to be in the right place pitching our story, and that got everything going.
What's the pitch for Bitterroot when you're telling people about it?
Well, I've learned to do a 1-minute pitch here, elevator pitch, if you will. It's about a family of monster hunters set during the Harlem Renaissance, and they use steampunk technology and alchemy to fight this infestation of monsters. You, as the reader, will find out why this family has to fight this infestation and where this infestation originated from.
That's perfect.
Sounds good.
That's
okay.
a perfect way to put it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So last night we saw Kevin Costner's movie Horizon, and it was awful. And I couldn't tell you what it was about.
Yeah.
So your explanation of what your comic is in a nutshell like that is exactly what I'm sitting here with my wife, and we're analyzing it afterwards, and I'm like, you should be able to tell someone what the movie you just watched was about.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
I don't know how someone can graduate to that level.
Right.
And
Kevin
not
Costner,
right.
like household name.
Yeah.
I think that you need people around you that can tell you no.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with that,
Trust me. I mean, I thanks, man. I appreciate that. I think, over the years, you just learn to fine tune it. It wasn't as smooth as it not at first. It wasn't as smooth as I described it, but you sit with your story and your characters. Both of you guys know, and it becomes a part of you. It's one of your children, and so just like your children, all of their quirks, their likes, dislikes. All of it, and so your kids what they're about to do before they do it. So I think I treat I try to treat a lot of our concepts, especially with that. That was kind of the beginning of me really learning that, because all before it was someone else's story, someone else's characters, working at Marvel and DC Comics. But now you have your own, and so you want to really cultivate that to where, like Will just said, when you share it, they immediately can connect with it.
Your collaborators, Walker and Brown, they're how did that like come together? Did they pitch to you? Did you pitch to them, or were you guys all just hanging out one day and like, hey, we should do a book together? What should it be?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of all of that. Me and David Walker, we worked at Marvel on a series called Power Man and Iron Fist, and it was it was an acclaimed series. It sold well. It made enough noise to where that was kind of like the beginning stages of my career starting to move upwards in the comic side of things. I worked in the related industries for years, like animation and video game design and all those things. But the comic thing never really took off until around that time. So me and David Walker, we had our relationship. I knew Chuck Brown because we had worked on a limited thing. As a matter of fact, the thing that's getting printed, my new graphic novel that's coming out, we worked on that idea about 15 years ago, or at least he came in to assist me. So I knew him even longer than David, and he was up and coming in the indie circuit of the comics, and he just needed to, get one, sliver of opportunity because he had so much talent. Speaking about Chuck Brown, so I said, hey, why don't we just come up with something that we could benefit, from for all of us. Me and David, we were wrapping up Power Man and Iron Fist, and we were trying to figure out what to do next. And I pitched the idea about bringing Chuck in because he has some really great ideas about this family back in the Harlem Renaissance time period that uses steampunk technology. We didn't really have the complete idea, but it was still the germ of the idea. And David thought it was a great idea. Plus, we had already worked on a series at Marvel, Luke Cage and Iron Fist, and some of the ideas that we wanted to do in that series was based on the Harlem Renaissance, and Marvel wasn't quite sold on that idea, so we kept a lot of those ideas, and we started to blend it in with that original concept. So it just started to come together from that standpoint.
That's kind of a theme that we keep coming back to on the podcast here, is that the publishers oftentimes just want to go with what they know works, and if anything strays a little bit too far from that, they're like nervous.
Yep.
So so that just leaves so much room for creators to go, just like you did, like go off and fine, I'll do it myself, and I'll make the thing myself.
Right. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did, man, because I think had we sat on that idea or just kind of pushed it off to the side and kept pursuing the the bigger publishers, Marvel, DC proper, that idea, it's unique enough to where it really did stand out from a lot of stuff, most stuff.
Yeah.
Especially at that moment. At that moment, there wasn't really a lot of that out there. But if we had sat on it just a little longer, we would have been late to the party, because shortly after us, there was at least a dozen other stories. Not because of they were I think we opened the door for a lot of stories to be told
Yeah.
like that.
Like so, it's one of those things where if you see it, you can be it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they're doing that. I can do that. I got
Yep.
my idea. Let's
Yep.
get going.
Yep.
Where'd the name Bitter Root come from?
I'll
Like,
take
who came
credit
up
for,
with that?
I'll take credit for that
Okay.
one, man. That was me. They you don't want to know what the original name was, or at least what they were trying to pitch. It was so cliche. It was like something from Image Comics in the 90s. That time, I'll put it this way: it had blood in it. That's for sure.
It has to. Yeah.
Blood was in the title, and I was like, guys, we gotta do a little better than this.
Right. I love the name.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 volumes out of that, and what were you doing, like one a year?
For the most part, and let me go back really quick to the title and why the title is called Bitter Root. There's kind of a double entendre to that. The most straightforward explanation is the plant bitterroot. There's a plant, and we use alchemy in our story, and this plant is the origins of their source of, as far as their resource, the core of their resources to be able to deal with this infestation of monsters. So that bitterroot plant is kind of like the main substance to create these serums that basically can kill monsters or cure people from becoming monsters, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect of it. And then the more social, philosophical side of it, if you will, is how over time, if something causes you harm, some type of trauma, if you don't deal with it, it can fester and build over time like a root. And once it takes, it gets deep, and it's hard to pull the deeper it gets because it's so ingrained. So that's pretty much the explanation behind the title.
I love it.
Yep,
I love it. And then, were you gonna say something, Will?
Well, I have a question, but it's going to take us in a different direction. So keep going if you want to go on this line.
I was going to ask, going back to the release schedule. So the first book comes out. Did you know it was a hit right then, or like nobody does 3 books if the first one's not selling, right?
Right. Well, I think, like I said earlier, we knew that we had something unique. Whether it was going to be a hit is another story, because we are talking about the comic book industry where, especially at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of stories out there like that story. And especially in Image, you had your run-of-the-mill superhero archetypal type stories that was mostly the main course for the independent stories, because that's the stuff that sold.
Right.
And so we knew we had something unique. We just didn't know quite if it would really hit the audience. We knew we had an audience also that went beyond the typical comic book audience, right? So we started to cater slowly. We built our audience around the comic industry, meaning we went outside of the comic industry, garnered their interests, and brought them into the comic industry, if you will. So it was
interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of folks was pretty, at the time, especially. I don't know if you are familiar with the artist Wes Craig. He is he's a co-creator for. Oh my God, my brain is fried. Super popular book, Deadly Class. The Deadly Class series. It was a comic series, and then it became a TV show. And again, another very unique story. But we were very much looking at the direction that they were going and how they were pulling from the college, demographic, because their story had this really unique take on uh, youth culture, especially it was a period piece because it was like the 80s to some degree, and ours is obviously a period piece. So we looked at a little bit of how they operated in terms of getting the demographic, reaching that demographic, and bringing that demographic along into the typical comic industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So it started,
so that first book, then I guess I know how, like, with Image, you don't get paid for a few months until those sales receipts come in, right?
Right.
So I'm just wondering about that that runway, that financial runway. A lot of times for people, it's like, how do I afford to work on a book I'm not getting paid for until 3 months or 6 months later or something like that. But then once, and you don't know if it's going to be successful. You don't know if you're going to even, make your money back or your time investment back.
Right.
But I'm just wondering how you were able to manage that. And I'm also coming at this thinking about, someone listening to this thinking, I want to do a book for Image. I've got this idea. They're sort of maybe in that same position where, they may have a little bit of a financial net that can tide them over to create that project. Maybe they don't. They're going to work on it nights and weekends. But I'm just wondering, like, how did you manage to fit this into all the other stuff that you got going on?
I think, well, the first part of that, I would say for me, I was just in a place financially, career-wise, where financially I was able to work on at least half of the series, or at least the first volume, which is about 3 issues worth. It was 5 issues in each volume. So I was in a place to where I was able to do that for 3 issues. I worked a lot. I mentioned it earlier about working in the animation industry, and I did a lot of that work, which it allows the animation industry, the projects that you're involved with. A lot of it is conceptual design, character design, what have you. It's a different discipline in process. So if you balance out your schedule the right way, you can do that along with doing something like a comic series. And Jake, you've done that a lot. So I just went after all of those types of jobs for financial stability while I work on the series. I would say that again, that's for me. I would say for anyone who is starting out, you could almost treat it the same, have the same mindset. Basically, I would, if you're working your typical 9 to 5 or your actual 9 to 5, balance it out and let that be your financial net that allows you to be able to have income and work on your creator-owned projects, what have you, in a certain time period. Treat it like 2 jobs. One pays, one will pay eventually. If you divide your time wisely in that way. Someone said something, even if you do a page a week of a comic or a graphic novel, what have you, let's just say you're trying to do a comic. Because I would say to any young person, don't try to go for a 100-page graphic novel when you've never done 5 pages before. Like, you have to do these things in increments, because I think that's the thing that's always misleading and misguiding to a lot of these young folks, or anyone who's interested in this and don't really understand the process of it, that you have to work on the the projects in increments. Like really break it down to, if you can, if you know that you're trying to, for the sake of argument, you want to do a 100-page graphic novel, let's not think about it in those terms, but think about it in, I need to do 5 pages in a month of this 100-page graphic novel. What does that look like? Can I do, if it's 5 pages a month based on my schedule, my work schedule, what have you, what does that look like? Maybe that's 1 page a week. Okay. Yeah. If that's 1 page a week, then what does that look like to achieve that 1 page a week? What does that look like daily? Okay. Now, what does that look like hourly? You have to be a lot more nuanced instead of trying to go for this big sweeping, achievement of trying to create this product, because you will never get it done.
Right. It's too overwhelming.
Yeah, it's too overwhelming. It's way too much. And again, I'd say if you go about it in that way or something similar to that, you'll see how much you're really made of in that time period too, because you should see how much work is involved. And now you're at a crossroads. Do I really want to do this? Or do I just like the idea? I just like the idea of doing it. And 90% of anyone that has aspirations for this stuff, as hard as it is to hear, 90% is just a cool idea. They don't really want to do that kind of work. They just like the idea. Right. So
they want to have a finished book. They don't want to make a finished book.
Exactly. And I just did a, because I also teach. I teach at an institution here, Benedict College, and I teach my profession. I basically teach graphic novel or storytelling or sequential art, if you will. And one of our assignments, each class lasts a year, and that class, the project in my class is creating a short story. You got one whole year to create 10 pages, pretty much. So I listen no problem. But I listen to you guys a lot, and I reference you guys a lot too when I'm teaching the class to help really understand the psychology of sequential art. Like, you have to already have your mind in a place to where when you go in, you're not just drawing the story. You're already connected enough to where stuff should start to come together. Yeah, you may have some hurdles, and you're supposed to have hurdles. But if you're connected enough, you can problem solve those hurdles. But without fail, even with 10 pages in a year, there are a few that don't finish. It's unfortunate, right? But but these are some of the folks that, they love comics, and all of the students that are part of my class, they're big, fans of comics and graphic novels and so on and so forth. But they find themselves always at that crossroad. Most succeed.
You almost do better doing 24-hour comic day with them and say, let's just, they don't have to be good pages. Let's just see if you can bust something out.
Right. But I do think it does help them, because it's funny enough, there was one student in my class who, she never done a comic, and she wasn't really even into comics. She just liked the idea of trying to tell a story using these sequential illustrations. And she was one of the best ones in the class. She doesn't draw what we consider traditional art when it comes to figure drawing and what have you when it comes to that type of story. But again, comics is just the one medium that you can tell stories in stick figures as long as the story is effective. So she basically kind of took that approach. she didn't do stick figures, but she had these unique organic figures that you can tell, one character from another, but her story was so strong that it all worked.
That's cool.
That's like Matthew Inman from the Oatmeal.
Right.
Drawing was not his first language at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I saw he's got a cartoon out now.
Is it Exploding Kittens cartoon or
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah. Yeah, his artwork is funny. It's funny artwork, but it's not like, what would you say?
It's primitive. It's not.
Yeah, it's a little primitive.
Okay.
It's perfect for the humor that he does, right?
Yeah. Good drawing, really good drawing would ruin his comic.
Yeah. It's true.
I wanted to ask. I'm looking at your work, and I'm wondering, like, how did you learn to draw? Where did you go to school? What did you do?
I'm still learning, man. And I'm saying that honestly. There are things that I'm just now looking at, and I'm like, oh, that's how you do that. That's how you fill in the blank. But in all seriousness, I started back since I could hold a pencil. I went to school. My higher education is at the same school that I teach. So I kind of came back as an alumni. They actually they reached out to me. They saw where I was going. They saw what I was doing with my career, and they reached out and wanted me to come back and speak to the art program. And when I did that, they proposed I do a workshop. I said, okay, I'll do that. And then they liked that. And then they asked, well, can you do this on a regular basis? And I'm like, well, that sounds like a class. And they said, well, maybe we could do a class. And I'm like, I'm a little busy for that. But they made it worth my while. And so, yeah, that's where that is. But yeah, I started
That's really
back.
Cool.
Yeah, I started back since I could hold a pen.
There's probably not that many schools that have someone as accomplished as yourself teaching a comic class or a graphic novel class.
You guys familiar with Nathan Fox, the artist Nathan Fox?
Yeah.
He's a buddy of mine, and again, we talk a lot because very similar. He's at School of Visual Arts in New York, and he had a similar sentiment about you're in a unique position. He was speaking about myself of being at a college, and this is what they call HBCUs, which is the historical Black institutions, which is even more of a rarity to be teaching something like that at a school like that. That's a really and we actually, like I said, we have this course where we create actual graphic novels with the students. So the first one just got published a little less than a year ago, in October of last year. And these kids are going around doing book signings and all that cool stuff. So it definitely, awesome. It's definitely making a whole different kind of impact in, because it's in a space that you don't normally see this kind of activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your style. The thing that I love about it is it looks like it just looks handcrafted. You see some comics and it's so polished and it's so sterile that you're like, where's the humanity in this comic? And I look at your stuff and I'm like, oh, it's a little bit messy. It's a little bit like wonky in places, but in all the right places, and you got the thicks and the thins and you know how to sling ink.
It's gritty.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I wanted to ask you about, you've got a project now that's on Zoop, and it's 1000 is what's called. Sanford Greene's 1000. You want us to tell us a little bit about that, what that is?
Okay, now this one I can't do in elevator pitch because it's been so long that it's been a long time that I've worked on it. But it's basically about this character who his true form is a dragon, and he committed something that was punishable by way of turning him into what the dragons consider the lowest form of any kind of creature, and that's a human. So, yeah, so
I love that. That's a good premise.
Yeah, so he basically has to commit 1,000 acts of penance in order to return back to his true form. And on his venture back to his true form, he encounters all these other characters that all have their acts of, well, they all have they're trying to find or fulfill their purpose as well. And he basically, in doing his penance, part of it is to bring these unlikely characters together that would aid him to his final destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's such a good, like a good premise. I think that's what one of your strengths is. Like, here's an interesting situation, and let's start there, and then let's put a story in there and put some characters in there and see what happens. This thing's square. Why is it square instead of more of a vertical, what you'd expect from a traditional comic?
So, like I said, this was something that was created a long time ago, but never really found a home for it in traditional publishing. So I was approached by Webtoons to put it onto their platform. They thought it was a perfect, type of story that would reach that genre that they are strongest in, and that's more of the anime centric genre, manga more specifically. And so that's where I started to put the actual stories, because I knew that and again, Webtoons is basically the digital platform that you use your mobile device to read whatever stories. So it's based on the scrolling format, where how people normally view their phones with whatever apps, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or what have you. They took that same premise format and implemented into the story, for storytelling on Webtoons. And I thought, didn't you have a Webtoons as well? You should. Both of you guys should have a Webtoons, to be honest with you.
I know. I do. I did throw a comic up there to like test it out many years ago, just to like see how this is. And I keep thinking about I should go back to it. It's a good platform for like sharing stuff.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the format is pretty. It's a huge learning curve. Well, not a huge learning curve, but it's a learning curve that it really does make you shift your thinking in story beats. In traditional storytelling, comic storytelling, the story beats can be one panel, can be one scene, and the very next panel with a proper explanation, you can explain an hour or two, or even a day or two, in terms of time difference. You can shift time more drastically in traditional storytelling. Whereas this, you literally have to move minute by minute, almost sometimes even seconds, in order for the transition.
Almost like storyboards.
It's almost like storyboards. So that part was definitely challenging. How do you take a traditional story, because the original story was done traditionally as a comic, and we took that original story and tried to, implement that into the webtoons format. And so that was a lot of extra drawing, to be honest with you. There's a lot more drawing in that type of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just want to go back to your Kickstarter / Zoop. and I had never heard of Zoop before. So I'm sure you know about Kickstarter. And can you talk about why you chose Zoop over Kickstarter?
Well, they honestly, they reached out a while ago, and they had a pretty unique pitch, or they have a pretty unique pitch in terms of, and they were doing this long before it. Now it's a little more options out there, but they were the first option in terms of fulfillment and being able to take care and handle all of the administrative work. That part for me was definitely the key, because they were the only ones really offering that type of service, where they do the campaign, and once the campaign is finished, they handle all the fulfillment. So you literally don't have to see any of the product if you choose not to. You may want to do some for if you want to do like a limited signing, and even with that, they take care of that. They ship it to you. They give you the labels to ship back to them once you're done with the signings. And so that was definitely,
so they're like a full service.
Full service, yeah.
Wow. So do they arrange the printer too?
That part is through there's a publisher that's handling that side of it. They handle a lot of the webtoon releases that go to print, like a lot of the webtoons that were webtoons. They go through this company called Rocket Ship. They handle all the publishing side. So to some degree, again, I don't really have any responsibilities other than to talk about it. They handle.
So you make the project.
Yep.
You make it, and then you promote it, and then you're done.
Yep.
Wow.
At least with this one, I mean, Rocket Ship. They a lot of the folks that are a part of Rocket Ship, they used to be a part of Webtoons, and but they saw an opportunity to take a lot of those stories that were in that format and do a printed version of them. And so again, they saw that as a great avenue to create a new company that basically publishes Webtoons.
Interesting. That's like, it seems like the perfect sort of blend between, it's like a step between self-publishing, Image Comics, Zoop sort of in the middle, right? Like, like I'm just gonna come here, I'm gonna make my project. They're gonna handle sort of the hard part, the part that's less creative, the more logistical part. So that's cool. That project ends on what day?
In about 3 weeks, I think. So it just launched last week. I don't know the exact dates. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure when this podcast is going to drop. So
okay.
So
probably one or two.
Sometime in August, right? Like mid-August, like
August 15th, I think.
Okay.
So
you guys, like, if you're listening to this, you gotta just, if you're not familiar with Sanford, you gotta Google his name. Go click on the link in the show notes and check out his art, because you really have one of the coolest styles, I think, in comics. And
Thanks.
I noticed you're also with you have an art seller, like an art dealer for your original art.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh man, Felix. he's going to get a kick out of this once he sees this this podcast. Felix Liu. We were acquainted for years. Actually, I knew a lot of the artists that he repped for years, and some of his I guess assistants, people that assist him at comic conventions and what have you. They assist the other artists and take care of all kinds of logistical stuff. I was friends with a lot of those folks as well, and they would always mention Felix and how what I do would be a pretty good fit for his stable of artists. And I, again, being friends with a lot of those guys, took that, as a compliment, and it was definitely flattering, and I was honored. But we never really gelled, we didn't come together until again, 2020 seems to be the year of a lot of impactful stuff in a good way, outside of the hard stuff. But it was around that time we started to talk, and he really liked what I was bringing to the table, and we started to work together. And it's been, I'll be honest with you, it's been career changing working under him and how he deals with artists that he represents. He really has, I think, set a whole new focus on what we consider modern art in this industry. You have your classic art stuff that, just to be honest with you, Jack Kirby or a John Buscema original or even a Jim Lee original, the average person cannot and probably should not be able to afford or to buy those types of pieces, because they're easy.
Yeah, $20,000 for a Jack Kirby, right?
Well, I would say a little more than that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
The prices are, and look, I would be the first to say absolutely they're priceless, in my opinion. I mean, no amount of money could measure up, but there are original art out there that is almost unattainable, and a very small percentage of folks can obtain this work. So Felix, he found a space that allows artists like myself who have something unique that people appreciate, but they may not necessarily connect it to in terms of the value that a lot of this original art is valued at.
Okay, so I want to just kind of, for the uninitiated in comics or understanding the comics industry, that's I'm talking to Will right here.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of give an overview of how a comics creator, just how that career kind of works. And so for years and years and years, essentially what you do is you'd make your comic art, you deliver your files, and then they would go make the book, it would get colored or whatever, but then you'd have this original art that you could then go sell on sort of like a secondary market. And if you're a really big, amazing artist, you could sell those for a ton of money. If you're sort of like mid-tier, lower tier, you might not be able to sell them, or if you could sell them, they'd go for $100 a page, something like that. And so you see artists, you'd go to a Comic-Con, you'd see an artist and they'd have their original arts and you could flip through and you could buy that. And I remember, every once in a while, like picking up a page here or there, and it'd be like $100 or something. And then about 5-6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I started seeing these art dealers. And these were guys that were sort of like hype men for a particular group of artists. And he would find artists that were sort of all in the same vibe, that complemented each other, but also kind of had their own thing going on as well.
Hmm.
And there was a few of these art dealers coming up, and Felix was one of these guys. But really, his job was, I think, and what he's been brilliant at is to say, this stuff is collectible, and you should get it now because it's only going to go up in price later. And sort of timed it with this period where people were wanting to invest in things that weren't stocks, that weren't, volatile, like NFTs, that weren't, different cryptocurrencies that fluctuate up and down, but that were these really substantial things that they knew could hold value. And that's original art, specifically comic art. And so I watched him take, Daniel Warren Johnson, for example. I remember when you could get a Daniel Warren Johnson commission for $100, and now you're lucky to pay $1,200, for one, if he's even doing commissions, right? And I think that's a lot of what Felix was able to do, to say, hey, we've got a really talented guy here. You guys don't sleep on him. He's going places. He's going to be making books. And then I think really hyping up when a book comes out, saying, okay, we're going to be selling the original art for this book. Do not miss this date because this stuff goes fast. And sort of feeding into that. Did I get any of that wrong? Is that kind of what's been happening here?
Dude, that's awesome. I almost think you need to lead in with that and then have me talk about Felix. I mean, I'm serious, because
okay.
it just sounds, that's just a really great intro into that whole world. But you didn't, you hit on everything that.
Well, that's really, why when you said it's been career changing, I see these things. I follow Felix. I can't afford a ton of original art. That's just out of my budget. But I like to collect digital. I'll take the scans and put them in a folder.
Okay.
Because I like looking at the originals and whatnot. But 30-page comic will go up for sale, or a 22-page comic go up for sale, and they're anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a page, depending on it, and they'll sell out in 30 minutes. And I know he takes a cut and the artist takes a cut, but that is like a nice paycheck for that artist after having completed the book, where there wasn't that paycheck there before, just because it's so hard to like connect buyers with, or connect collectors with creators, through conventions or through your own website or whatnot. People just don't know how to find it.
Right. Yeah, and here's the thing that again with that aspect of it, and I'll speak specifically to Felix and how what you shared in terms of bringing value to the original art. It's partly the artist. The other part is what the art represents, what's being depicted in the art. A specific character. Obviously, the more popular the character, the more opportunity for the value to be higher. But I've seen, especially with Felix, that almost doesn't even matter. He can almost get the same value for your creator-owned concept that you would get from Spider-Man. It just all depends on. It's all based on how he markets it and how.
No, his genius.
Yeah,
his genius is the collector's market used to be, or in to a degree it still is, about the characters. I'm going to collect Captain Marvel or Captain America or Spider-Man or Batman. I'm a Batman collector. And Felix says it should be about the creators. And I'm going to collect Sanford Greene's art, or Daniel Warren Johnson's art, or James Herron's art, and I don't care what they're creating. I'm a fan of them, and I want whatever they're coming out with. And then within that, now I'm going to look for a page that has one of their characters on it doing something cool, you know, because that might, it's cool, but it also might add a little bit more resale value if I ever do want to sell it again. And I really love that about what he's doing there. It's shifting that focus from the creations to the creators.
To the creators. He has, I call him like one of those guys that does the tricks with the spinning plates. He can spin. Yeah. He can spin 5. I think there are about 5 plates that he can spin simultaneously without missing a beat. That's 2 of them. Then there's a third one where he can do this. He knows how to cater to a specific collector. This is kind of like a thing that you don't. It's all the stuff that you don't see. He'll cater to. It may not be a lot of collectors, but he knows enough of the folks and has enough relationships in this industry and outside of this industry where he knows this is the kind of thing that they would want, and he could get that connection with that audience. And then there's this other plate that I think I just fell in love with, and that's the community that he can. He creates this frenzy. That's the other plate, but then he creates this community that goes along with it. Like we do dinners together. We do other functions. Went to I didn't go on the trip, but they went to Japan. Just a lot of the guys that he represents. He just does this stuff that you feel like you're a part of. Again, a network, a community, and it's more than just selling art, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's a true, like, you know, this is a big word, but a symbiotic relationship, you know, like he's benefiting from the artists are benefiting from him. And the more you take care of each other, the better everybody does.
Sure.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's cool. And
he's definitely the tide that raises all boats, because he has those relationships, and those relationships, they value him, and then that permeates to other folks that we hear about that, and now they want to see what's the big fuss. And so again, and of course that, you know, we benefit from that.
Yeah. The other thing too I like about this, and maybe we'll finish out the podcast with this topic, and that is going back to what I was saying, like your art has soul. The art that Felix represents has soul. These are like artisanal comic making, because comics was really going down this path where just get it done as fast as possible, use as many digital tools as possible. And Felix, and I would say the Felix crew, like everybody who's on there, is let's put as much on the paper as we can. Let's sling ink. Let's use whiteout where we can. Let's cut out paper and paste it on there to fix mistakes instead of fixing it digitally, so that we have this really genuine artifact at the end of it. And what that brings me to is artists using AI, or AI taking away jobs from artists. And you've sort of AI proofed your career in that the people who want your work want something drawn by a human. They're not going to want something that's been spit out of a computer, and then they want the actual original art that the human has. And those are two things that a computer can't offer these people.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that, and how do you feel about like sort of AI tools and the future of, or the intersection of that with comics?
A lot of what you just shared, man, being AI proof, if you will, has been kind of the mindset for, at least for me, before it was kind of a thing that was among the masses. We knew about it, and there was always conversations about it. we really, I say we, speaking of a lot of artists, we had these conversations about what does this mean? Is it going to be just like another tool like Photoshop, or is it going to be the thing that's going to literally take over? And we were of the notion, and again, I'm saying we because a lot of us had these conversations of, well, if I'm putting stuff on paper, there's nothing that's going to ever take that away. Now, mind you, we're realistic too that there are certain occupations in the art field where AI probably will take over. We've seen some of it, hints of it, but then you started seeing some pushback, or a lot of pushback. Some of it, again, it's just like with any new technology, there's this excitement and then this immediate fear and then anger and pushback, and then it kind of subsides, and then you kind of get what you're going to get. And I think we're heading in that direction right now. And as that is in that space or going towards that space, one of the things that is I'm very grateful for is that we were already having those conversations and setting ourselves up for this specific time. That's why I didn't go, all the way digital and started to, again, going back to Felix, he emphasized everything. I worked on the Spider-Verse movie. And even with that, there was a lot of digital work obviously involved with that. But there were a lot of pieces that I worked on, or things that I worked on concept-wise, that he emphasized. Please put that on paper, man, because how many of the artists are going to do something like that? I mean, because it's so easy to do a lot of the conceptual stuff digital. I didn't think it was that big of it would make that big of a difference, but it definitely made a big difference in terms of how people received even something like that. It's one thing to do that with sequential art, with actual traditional comics, but to do that with just doing that in conceptual stuff, putting it on paper.
When I saw that, because I've worked in concept art for animation, and when I saw you dropping those the concept art stuff that you did for Spider-Verse, but as traditional digital or traditional inks, like traditional art, I was just like, he is so smart. Like, now everybody wants a piece of history, and whether it's a comic or whether it's an animated film, if you can own an original animated cell from Akira, you've got a little hunk of gold, right? Well, now that everything's digital, there's no original art that you can own from it, from any of these animation projects. And for you to be like, well, I've got all these sheets of concept art I did traditionally, and I'm sure people just tripped over themselves to pick some of that up.
That was a funny story when Felix dropped those originals for and again he does all these, a lot of this stuff now is pretty common, but early few years ago it was very fresh, innovative thinking, creating this demand, this frenzy over traditional art. He would do what they call art drops, where he would make an announcement that this art is coming at a certain date and time, and he'll do a preview of the art so that you can at least see what it looks like before it drops, and then it drops, and you got, like you said earlier, you got about maybe 15 to 20 minutes before it's gone. So you are anticipating this thing, and you got collectors and anyone that's just curious they're looking in on this, and that's pretty much what happened with that work, or any of the stuff that he does. I was on a plane. I was on a plane headed to Pensacola for an event. When I got off the plane, my phone was exploding with people saying congratulations, and I'm like, for what? And that was the news about what those originals went for. So again, that's all of his hard work and strategically laying those things out to make it successful for everyone.
Yeah. Well, we gotta wrap this up. I'm so glad we were able to make this work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Was there
Yeah.
any other questions you had, Will, or anything you wanted to add, Sanford?
That was very interesting. Comics is definitely not my world, but I really appreciate your art.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate.
All right, that was Sanford. Such a cool guy. He's so chill, man. He's so easy to talk to. I really enjoyed it, and I loved getting into the, again, like we said at the beginning there, getting into the original art aspect of comics and how that is sort of changing the game for creators, because it's like this extra substantial like income boost,
Right.
for some of these comic creators.
You know, one thing he didn't brag about, but that I took note of, was how he had to, you know, as an artist, had to budget his money so that he could work on, you know, comics for, I'm assuming Marvel, and getting paid regularly, but then also working on his own comics with, was it with Image, where you know, you don't get paid right away. That says a lot.
Right.
As an artist, one of the things we have to do in order to play for our career, right, is we have to be really good at budgeting money. And he talked about being able to do that. And he didn't really get into the sacrifices that he had to make, but I'm sure there were some. I mean, like, it's hard to,
you read
it's
between
hard
the
to,
lines, you can see.
yeah, it's hard. It's not easy to get into the mindset of foregoing, you know, current gratification on buying stuff that you really want right now, saving that money to be able to use it to exist so that you can see better things, basically working on a comic that you're not getting paid for right now, but you're going to get paid for later.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn. We're becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts are Will Terry, Lee White, Jake Parker. Lee could not join us. He is on assignment. He was in Chicago working on at a workshop, a watercolor workshop. And so next time we have him on the show, we're going to have him give us a full rundown of that experience, which was really cool. He's texting us and showing us the artwork that he's making. And I told him, I absolutely want one of those pieces hanging up on my bathroom wall. It's that good. So anyways, podcast produced by Daniel Tu. That's Daniel TU. And just a shout out to some of our people who help us here at SVSLearn. Special thanks to our keeper of curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, our show notes wrangler, Lily Howell, our chief operations officer, Lisa Fott, our, what would we call him, a production manager liaison with other companies that we work with, Preston Smith, and our illustrator, Annalise Black. Now, go draw something.